Willow Turner's hand trembled as she stared down the barrel of Marshall Jenkins' gun, her tear-streaked face reflecting the warm glow of sunset that bathed the dusty main street of Promise Creek. The crowd that had gathered to witness her arrest hurled accusations that stung worse than the rope burns on her wrists. "Thief," they shouted. "Traitor," they spat. But in her heart, she knew the truth, even if no one else in this God-forsaken town would believe it. The year was 1878, and Promise Creek was a small but growing settlement in the Arizona Territory. Like many frontier towns, it had sprung up along the newly built Southern Pacific Railroad, drawing prospectors, ranchers, and those seeking a fresh start in the untamed West. Willow had arrived just 8 months prior, a 22-year-old woman with nothing but determination and the skills her father had taught her as a telegraph operator before his passing. "Move along," Marshall Jenkins barked, prodding her forward with his gun. "The judge will be here next week, and until then, you'll be getting comfortable in our jail." Willow stumbled forward, her long chestnut hair falling across her face. "I'm telling you, I didn't steal that money. I didn't betray anyone's trust." "Save it for the judge, Miss Turner," Jenkins replied coldly. "We found the missing money from the bank in your room, wrapped up nice and neat in your shawl." "Someone put it there," Willow cried out, her voice breaking. "I was framed." From the edge of the crowd, a tall figure stepped forward. Samuel Hayes stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. At 30 years old, he had the weathered look of a man who had seen far more than his years should allow. His reputation as one of the territory's fastest guns and fairest men had earned him respect, even from those who feared him. "That's a mighty serious accusation, Marshal," Samuel said, his deep voice carrying across the now hushed street. "Maybe we ought to hear the lady out before locking her away." Marshall Jenkins scowled. "This ain't your business, Hayes. The evidence is clear as day." "Nothing in Promise Creek is as clear as it seems," Samuel replied, taking another step forward. "And I reckon justice deserves more than just appearances." Willow's gaze locked with Samuel's, and for a moment, hope flickered in her chest. She had seen him around town since her arrival, but had exchanged no more than pleasantries with the quiet Cowboy, who often took his meals at the telegraph office where she worked. "Unless you're volunteering to be her keeper until the judge arrives," Jenkins said with a sneer, "step aside and let me do my job." A long moment passed before Samuel nodded. "As a matter of fact, I am. I'll post her bail and take responsibility for her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Willow's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't be serious, Hayes," Jenkins protested. "She's accused of stealing over $2,000 from the bank, and I'm saying she didn't do it," Samuel replied firmly. "I'll put up my ranch as collateral. If she runs, you can take it all." The marshal's face reddened. "Fine," he spat after a tense silence. "But she's your problem now, and if that money doesn't turn up or she tries to flee, you'll lose everything you've worked for." As the crowd dispersed with disapproving murmurs, Samuel approached Willow. The marshal reluctantly unlocked her restraints. "Why?" Willow whispered, rubbing her chafed wrists. "Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know?" Samuel's blue eyes met her steadily. "Because I've seen enough innocent people hanged on this frontier to last a lifetime. And because I've been watching you since you arrived in town. You're not a thief, Miss Turner. Call me Willow," she said softly, "and thank you, I won't forget this." "Don't thank me yet," Samuel replied, his expression grave. "We've got a week to prove your innocence before Judge Hollister arrives. He's not known for his mercy." They walked side by side down the street, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed them. Willow held her head high despite the shame burning in her chest. She had come to Promise Creek seeking a fresh start after losing her family, and now her reputation lay in tatters. "Where are we going?" she asked as they reached the edge of town. "My ranch is about 3 miles outside town," Samuel explained. "It's not much, but it's safe. My foreman Diego and his wife Maria live in the house too. You'll stay there while we figure this out." Willow halted. "Mr. Hayes, Sam," he corrected. "Sam," she continued, "I can't impose on you like this. You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you work harder than anyone at that telegraph office. I know you send money every month to an orphanage back east, and I know that someone in this town wants you gone badly enough to frame you for theft." Her eyes widened. "How do you know about the orphanage?" A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Small towns have big ears, Miss Willow. Now come on, let's get you settled before dark." Samuel's ranch was modest but well kept, with a two-story house, a barn, and several corrals for his horses. He bred and trained quarter horses, selling them to ranchers and the occasional cavalry unit. As they approached, a middle-aged Mexican couple emerged from the house. "Diego, Maria," Samuel called out. "This is Miss Willow Turner. She'll be staying with us for a while." Maria's warm brown eyes took in Willow's disheveled appearance and tear-stained face without judgment. "Come, Nina," she said, taking Willow's arm gently. "Let us get you cleaned up and fed." As Maria led her inside, Willow glanced back to see Samuel deep in conversation with Diego, both men wearing grave expressions. The bedroom Maria showed her to was small but comfortable, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and curtains that fluttered in the evening breeze. "I heard what happened in town," Maria said as she poured warm water into a basin. "Do not worry what people say. Samuel is a good judge of character." "Why would he risk so much for me?" Willow asked, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "His entire ranch." Maria's smile was knowing. "That man has been watching you since the day you arrived. He notices things others do not. If he believes in your innocence, there is good reason." After washing up and changing into a simple dress Maria provided, Willow joined the others for a dinner of beef stew and fresh bread. Despite her situation, she found comfort in the easy companionship around the table. "Tomorrow we start looking for answers," Samuel said as they finished their meal. "Someone set you up and I aim to find out who." "Why would anyone want to frame me?" Willow asked. "I've only been in Promise Creek 8 months. I barely know anyone outside the telegraph office." "That's what we need to figure out," Samuel replied. "Tell me everything that happened leading up to the money being found." Willow recounted her day. She had worked her usual shift at the telegraph office, delivered a few messages around town, then returned to her room at Mrs. Perkins' boarding house to find Marshal Jenkins and 2 deputies waiting with a search warrant. "They went straight to my trunk," she recalled, like they knew exactly where to look. "The money was wrapped in my mother's shawl, an heirloom I would never use for something like that." Samuel's brow furrowed. "Who knew about that shawl? Just Mrs. Perkins, maybe." "I took it out sometimes on cold evenings." "What about the messages you delivered?" Diego asked. "Where did they take you?" Willow thought for a moment. "I delivered one to Mr. Thornton at the bank, one to the general store, and one to Mr. Crawford at the saloon." Samuel and Diego exchanged a look. "Crawford," Samuel muttered. "Interesting coincidence." "What do you mean?" Willow asked. "Randall Crawford has been trying to buy my land for months," Samuel explained. "He wants to expand his operations beyond the saloon. Says the railroad is bringing a mining company that wants the water rights to the creek that runs through my property. You think he framed me to distract you, or force you to sell if you lost your ranch as my collateral?" Willow's mind raced with the possibilities. "It's possible," Samuel admitted. "Crawford's ambitious and not always particular about his methods, but we need proof, not just suspicions." The next morning, Samuel rode into town with Willow. They had decided that hiding away would only make her appear guilty. Instead, she would hold her head high and continue her work at the telegraph office while Samuel made inquiries. The stares and whispers followed them down the main street, but Willow forced herself to ignore them. At the telegraph office, her employer, Mr. Harrington, greeted her with surprise. "Miss Turner, I didn't expect to see you after yesterday's incident." "I'm innocent, Mr. Harrington," she said firmly, "and I intend to prove it before Judge Hollister arrives." The older man looked uncomfortable. "Well, I suppose you can stay on until this is sorted out." Business has been brisk lately. While Willow resumed her duties, Samuel visited the bank. Theodore Thornton, the bank manager, was a thin, nervous man who had lived in Promise Creek since its founding. "Mr. Hayes," he said, adjusting his spectacles, "what brings you to the bank today?" "Not considering selling that fine ranch of yours, I hope." "Not today, Thornton," Samuel replied easily. "I'm here about the stolen money. Tell me who discovered it was missing." Thornton shifted uncomfortably. "Crawford reported it. Said he'd come in to make a deposit and noticed the safe was ajar. When I checked, $2,000 was missing from yesterday's deposits. And how would Crawford know what should be in your safe?" The banker's face reddened. "Well, that is to say, he's one of our largest depositors." "Does he have debts, financial troubles?" I couldn't possibly discuss a client's finances, Thornton protested weakly. Samuel leaned forward. Thornton, an innocent woman's life is at stake. Judge Hollister has hanged people for stealing far less. After a moment's hesitation, Thornton whispered, Crawford's been making large withdrawals lately. Paid some men who came in from Tucson. Rough sorts. Samuel nodded grimly and headed for the door. Hayes, Thornton called after him. Be careful, Crawford has powerful friends. Samuel's next stop was the saloon, though it was barely noon. The Golden Nugget was already half full with miners and cowboys. Randall Crawford stood behind the bar, his expensive suit and gold watch setting him apart from his patrons. Hayes, Crawford acknowledged with a thin smile. Bit early for you, isn't it? Or are you celebrating your new house guest? Several men chuckled, and Samuel felt his temper rise. He kept his voice level as he approached the bar. Just wondering how a telegraph operator making $20 a month managed to steal $2,000 from your bank deposit without anyone noticing until you conveniently pointed it out. Crawford's smile disappeared. Careful, Cowboy, that sounds dangerously close to an accusation. Just thinking out loud, Samuel replied. Seems mighty coincidental that the day after I refused to sell you my ranch, the woman I've been sweet on gets framed for theft. Sweet on her, are you? Crawford's eyebrows rose. That explains your foolish gesture. But I had nothing to do with Miss Turner's predicament. Perhaps she's not as innocent as those pretty eyes suggest. Samuel's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to remain calm. When the truth comes out, Crawford, you'd better hope you're far from Promise Creek. Throughout the day, Samuel continued his investigations while Willow worked at the telegraph office. She noticed an unusual number of messages coming through for Randall Crawford, most in code she wasn't familiar with. When Samuel collected her at the end of the day, she shared this observation. He's planning something, Samuel murmured as they rode back to the ranch. Thornton mentioned he paid some men from Tucson, hired guns most likely. But why frame me? Willow asked, perplexed. I'm nothing in this town. Samuel glanced at her. Maybe because of me. Crawford's been watching me for months, probably noticed I take my meals where you work, that I always choose the table near your counter. Willow felt heat rise to her cheeks. I noticed that too, she admitted softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the troubles surrounding them faded away. Then Samuel cleared his throat and looked ahead. We need evidence. Without it, it's just our word against Crawford's, and he has influence with people like Marshall Jenkins. The next day brought a new development. As Willow sorted through the morning's telegrams, she found one addressed to Crawford that wasn't in his usual code. The sender had made a mistake, sending it in clear text. Shipment arriving Friday, stop payment ready ? Stop reply soonest. Stop. Willow quickly copied the message before delivering the original to the saloon. Crawford read it while she waited and cursed under his breath. Tell them yes, payment ready, he snapped, scribbling a response. And use the damn code next time. Back at the telegraph office, Willow sent Crawford's response, her mind racing. Whatever shipment Crawford expected was arriving Friday, the day before Judge Hollister was due in Promise Creek. When she told Samuel that evening, his expression darkened. Could be anything, he said. Legal goods, illegal whiskey, weapons, or men, Diego suggested from across the table. Hired guns like you suspected, but why? Maria asked. What does he gain by bringing trouble to Promise Creek? Samuel stared into the distance. The mining company. Crawford mentioned them wanting water rights. If they're coming in force, they might be planning to take what they want, regardless of who owns the deed. And framing me, Willow pressed. Distraction, Samuel replied. Gets me involved in your problems instead of watching him, and if I lost the ranch because you fled, all the better for him. The next day, they decided to watch Crawford more closely. While Willow worked at the telegraph office, keeping an eye on his messages, Samuel and Diego took turns observing the saloon and Crawford's movements around town. By mid-afternoon, Samuel had seen Crawford meet with Marshall Jenkins twice and dispatch a rider toward Tucson. He was returning to his horse when a familiar voice called out, Hayes, hold up there. Samuel turned to see Theodore Thornton hurrying toward him, clutching his hat against the breeze. Thornton, Samuel acknowledged. What can I do for you? The banker glanced around nervously before speaking in a low voice. I've been thinking about our conversation. Something didn't sit right with me about that theft. Go on, Samuel encouraged. Crawford claimed he noticed the safe ajar when he came to make a deposit. But I checked the ledger, he didn't make any deposit that day. Samuel's eyes narrowed. Are you certain? Thornton nodded emphatically. Absolutely, and there's more. I examined the safe more carefully. The lock wasn't damaged. Whoever opened it had the combination. Who has access to that combination? Just myself and my assistant, Robert Fuller. Thornton hesitated. Fuller's been spending a lot of time at Crawford's saloon lately, running up debts. Samuel clapped the banker on the shoulder. Thornton, you may have just saved an innocent woman's life. Armed with this new information, Samuel sought out Robert Fuller. The bank assistant was a young man with expensive tastes and a weakness for gambling, a dangerous combination in a frontier town. Samuel found him leaving the bank that evening and followed him to the small house he rented behind the blacksmith shop. As Fuller unlocked his door, Samuel stepped out of the shadows. Evening, Fuller, we need to talk. The young man jumped. Hayes, you startled me. What's this about? The missing money from the bank. The money that somehow ended up in Willow Turner's room. Fuller's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about. Thornton says only 2 people know the safe combination, him and you. Samuel stepped closer. Crawford has you deep in debt, doesn't he? Made you an offer to help him frame an innocent woman. You can't prove anything, Fuller whispered, but his trembling hands betrayed him. Maybe not, Samuel agreed. But Judge Hollister arrives Saturday, and he's not particular about proof when it comes to bank theft, especially by bank employees. Fuller swallowed hard. What do you want? The truth. In writing, everything Crawford had you do. After an hour of persuasion that involved both threats and promises of leniency, Fuller produced a signed confession. He admitted to taking the money on Crawford's orders and planting it in Willow's room while she was at work. Crawford had promised to forgive his gambling debts in exchange. Samuel took the confession to Marshal Jenkins, who read it with a deepening frown. This is serious, Hayes. Crawford's an important man in Promise Creek. More important than justice, Samuel challenged. Jenkins sighed heavily. I'll need to speak to Fuller myself. If his story holds up, I'll withdraw the charges against Miss Turner, but Crawford won't take this lying down. I'm counting on it, Samuel replied grimly. The next morning, Willow arrived at the telegraph office to find a notice posted on the door. All charges against Willow Turner dropped by order of Marshal Jenkins. Her heart soared as she rushed inside to find Mr. Harrington. Did you see? She exclaimed. The charges are dropped. The older man smiled. Samuel Hayes brought the notice by himself at dawn, said to tell you he's gone to meet someone about some business but will see you this evening. Throughout the day, Willow noticed the town's attitude toward her gradually shifting. Where there had been accusatory glances, now there were curious looks and even a few apologetic smiles. By afternoon, the news of Robert Fuller's confession had spread through Promise Creek like wildfire. As she was preparing to close the office, the door burst open. Randall Crawford stood there, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his eyes wild with anger. You ruined everything, he snarled, advancing toward her. You and that meddling cowboy. Willow backed away, fear clutching at her throat. Mr. Crawford, I don't know what you mean. My plans, my investors, they're arriving tomorrow expecting results, and instead I'm being investigated for framing you. He reached inside his coat and pulled out a revolver. If I'm going down, I'm taking Hayes' precious telegraph girl with me. Willow's scream died in her throat as the door crashed open again. Samuel stood there, his own gun drawn. Put it down, Crawford, he commanded. It's over. Crawford spun around, his gun now pointed at Samuel. Hayes, should have known you'd show up to play hero. Did you really think I wouldn't have backup plans? As if on cue, 2 rough-looking men appeared in the doorway behind Samuel, guns drawn. Drop your weapon, Hayes, one of them ordered. Samuel hesitated, then slowly lowered his gun to the floor. Crawford smiled triumphantly. Not so brave now, are you? I've still got men coming tomorrow enough to take what I want, with or without the law's blessing. You're talking about robbery and murder, Samuel said evenly. There's no walking away from that, Crawford. Crawford laughed. Who's going to stop me? You'll be dead along with your woman here. Just another tragic shooting in a lawless town. As he raised his gun toward Samuel, Willow acted on instinct. She grabbed the heavy telegraph key from her desk and hurled it at Crawford's head. The unexpected projectile struck him in the temple, causing his shot to go wide. In the moment of confusion, Samuel dove for his discarded weapon. Gunfire erupted in the small office. Willow ducked behind her desk, covering her ears against the deafening noise. When the shooting stopped, she peered cautiously over the desk. Crawford lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling beneath him. One of his men was similarly still while the other had fled. And Samuel, her heart stopped as she saw him slumped against the wall, crimson staining his shirt. "Sam." She cried, rushing to him. "Oh God, Sam, please be alive." His eyes fluttered open. "Takes more than Crawford's hired gun to kill me," he muttered, wincing as she pressed her hands against the wound in his shoulder. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life, again." "And you saved mine," he replied with a weak smile. "That was some throw with that telegraph key." Within minutes, Marshal Jenkins and a crowd of townspeople arrived, drawn by the gunshots. As Samuel was carried to Doc Wilson's office, Willow refused to leave his side. The doctor extracted the bullet and pronounced that with proper care, Samuel would make a full recovery. "You're a lucky man, Hayes," Doc Wilson said as he finished bandaging the wound. "Inch to the left and you'd be meeting your maker." "Don't feel particularly lucky at the moment," Samuel grunted. "Oh, I don't know," the doctor replied with a knowing glance at Willow. "Seems to me you've got plenty to be thankful for." As the doctor stepped out to speak with Marshal Jenkins, Willow moved closer to Samuel's bedside. "The marshal says Fuller's testimony and what happened today are enough to clear my name completely," she said softly. "And apparently Crawford had been planning to bring in armed men to force several ranchers, including you, off their land for some mining operation." Samuel nodded. "The water rights. That creek on my property feeds half the valley. With control of it, they could dictate terms to everyone downstream." "Your blood proved my innocence, Sam," Willow whispered, taking his hand. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." His fingers tightened around hers. "Stay," he said simply. "Not just until this is over, but stay at the ranch with me." Her heart fluttered in her chest. "Sam, are you asking what I think you're asking? Probably doing a poor job of it," he admitted with a rueful smile. "I'm not good with words, Willow. But I knew from the first time I saw you at that telegraph office that you were someone special. These past few days have only proven me right." Willow leaned forward and gently pressed her lips to his. "Yes," she whispered against his mouth. "I'll stay." Judge Hollister arrived in Promise Creek the next day to find a very different situation than expected. Instead of presiding over Willow's theft trial, he heard evidence against Crawford's conspirators and the full extent of their planned takeover. Robert Fuller received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony, while the surviving gunman revealed the names of others involved in the scheme, including several officials from the territorial capital who had accepted bribes. As Samuel recuperated at his ranch, Willow split her time between caring for him and continuing her work at the telegraph office. The people of Promise Creek, now aware of how close they had come to losing their homes, treated her with newfound respect. 3 months later, as summer gave way to autumn, Willow and Samuel were married under the ancient cottonwood tree by the creek that had nearly cost them everything. The entire town turned out for the celebration, eager to witness the union of two people whose story had already become legend in Promise Creek. "Not bad for a telegraph operator and a stubborn cowboy," Samuel murmured as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. Willow laughed, her eyes bright with happiness. "I think we make quite the team, Mr. Hayes." "That we do, Mrs. Hayes," he agreed, pulling her closer. "That we do." As the years passed, their ranch prospered. They added a wing to the house when their first child was born, a daughter they named Hope. 2 sons followed, strong boys who grew up learning both their father's way with horses and their mother's skill with words. Willow continued working at the telegraph office part-time, eventually buying it from Mr. Harrington when he retired. Under her management, it expanded to include a small newspaper, the Promise Creek Chronicle, which became known throughout the territory for its honest reporting and unwavering commitment to the truth. Samuel's reputation as the man who had stopped Crawford's scheme brought him respect that eventually led to his election as mayor. Together, they helped guide Promise Creek from a rough frontier settlement into a thriving town where justice and fairness were valued above all. And on quiet evenings, When the children were asleep and the day's work was done, they would sit together on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. In those moments, with her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist, they would remember how close they had come to losing everything and how love, courage, and one man's unwavering belief in an accused woman's innocence had changed not just their lives, but the future of Promise Creek itself. "I never thanked you properly," Willow said on one such evening, 20 years after the events that had brought them together. "For what?" Samuel asked, his hair now streaked with silver but his eyes still as blue and clear as the day they'd met. "For believing in me when no one else would. For risking everything to prove my innocence." Samuel smiled and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Best risk I ever took," he said simply. And in the gentle Arizona twilight, with the legacy they had built together spread out before them, Willow Turner Hayes knew that some betrayals, though painful in the moment, could lead to the greatest love stories ever told.